You see, since we are discussing Krishnamurti's teachings and whether uh, it is possible to live the teachings or what does it mean to live the teachings, I would like to maybe allude to the teachings and the statements that he himself has made. I hope it's allowed, and because often we refrain from quoting Krishnamurti and in a Krishnamurti dialogue, but I think here it seems somewhat necessary to me. I think there's an academic side to this where one is required to actually familiarize oneself intellectually with what he is saying. And he says that in order to do that, you should study the teachings. The way a doctor studies medicine, that's his, these are his words. Or as a Buddhist would study the teachings of the Buddha. So there's an intellectual side where one has to become familiar with the words. But you see, in the teachings, Krishnamurti has very seamlessly joined different aspects of life, which we generally put into watertight compartments. Now he is talking about psychology. So there are people who become interested in the teachings mainly primarily because Krishnaji's emphasis is on understanding the human mind, consciousness, the whole gamut of human emotions. So then that interests psychologists a lot. They often, some of them look upon him as a psychotherapist who is offering solutions to all kinds of psychotic and neurotic behavior and so on. Then there is a very strong aspect which can be termed as the religious aspect because Krishnaji is looked upon as a thinker, a philosopher, and a religious teacher who addressed almost the whole world, talking to people for 60 years, leaving behind 75 books. Half of his works still remain unpublished. So, an enormous body of work. Now, the religion, mostly he's talking about the religious mind, the mind, what is the meaning of religion, gives a completely different meaning to religion, challenges the foundation of organized religion, has no beliefs, no organized religion, no teachers, no gurus. So this is also another aspect of the teaching that has to be understood. Then one thing that we often neglect or forget to uh, look for in the teachings because we get caught up in words and there's an intellectual feast for those who are looking for intellectual stimulation, sensation, and that is the quest for the sacred, talking about something that beyond lies beyond everything that mind has accumulated, created. So you see, and he also suggests different approaches to the teaching. One, as I mentioned, is the intellectual. He also asks the listener or the reader if they can listen to him with tears in their eyes. Or can you listen to me as you would listen to the song of a bird? So see, there are different approaches, even which he mentions, to understanding what he's saying. If you look at the statement he made about 10 days before he passed away, in which he very categorically said that nobody who has been close to me has understood a word of what I've been saying for 70 years. He used the word supreme energy, super energy, immense energy, and said no, neither here nor anybody in the public has understood. And then he also said that somebody may, if he lives the teachings. Now, what does it mean to live the teachings? He used the word teachings. There was a lot of deliberation, discussions as to what should be, how the what he did should be named, what should it be called, the works of Krishnamurti or the the talks and writings. Eventually, he himself went for the word, settled for the word teachings. So something which he has uh, imparted to people at large, to individuals, to small groups. He himself called it teachings. Now, to the question as to how one should live the teachings, he said there are no teachings. He said what you need to explore is your own life. There are no teachings to explore. So it seems quite obvious that Krishnaji talks to people, feel that when he talks, it seems he is addressing his or her own problem. He's talking about him. He's talking about her. Though he's talking about something else, because he has covered the whole gamut, the vast field of the whole movement of consciousness, which is marked by emotions, feelings, mm, all kinds of impulses, and so on. So one can easily identify, one can easily find something that one is looking for in the teachings. So he says exploration of the teachings actually means exploration of your own life. What does it mean to explore one's own life? Perhaps, as he himself pointed out, it is to explore our relationships. Relationships, as has been pointed out, is the only mirror in which self knowing can be possible. So, can we say, can we say this, put this as a question that to live the teachings means to explore one's own life, to understand oneself, which is possible in the mirror of relationships with people, things, and ideas, the thoughts, the conclusions, the beliefs that we have. But I think to make it a bit simpler, because often people say that Krishnamurti doesn't answer the how question. If you ask him how, he says, do it, sir, and find out. But I think on this matter, he was quite clear because the confusion remained even among people who were quite close to him. And even as late as 1980, when the biography was, I think, by Mary Lutens was being written, she herself asked Krishnaji whether he could summarize the teachings. I think Krishnamurti stuck to what he had said in 1929 in his Truth is a Pathless Land speech. He more or less adhered to the same, basically the same principle. Maybe his language changed, but he is stuck to what he had said in Holland in 1929 while disbanding the organization that was built around his name, his personality. Now, in 1980, like almost 50 years after he made that statement, when he was asked to summarize the teaching, he summarized it in hardly around 1,000 words. And I think that can help a lot in understanding what it means to live the teachings. If you allow me, Kamalji, I just want to summarize the summary, not read the whole thing, but in brief, I just want to talk about what he said. And maybe that gives us some insight into what does it mean to live the teachings. So there are 5 or 6 paragraphs in that. He begins by saying, repeats, he says the core of the teachings is contained in the 1929 speech of Truth is a Pathless Land. That is the beginning. Then he reiterates that through a dogma, ritual, or philosophical knowledge, you cannot come to it. So perhaps he is trying to describe what amounts to not living the teachings, which is you can't do it through knowledge, through philosophy, through psychological techniques. But he says that it happens through an understanding of the contents of your mind, through observation of the content of consciousness, and not through an intellectual analysis or introspective dissection of what is inside, what this consciousness contains, which is the same as consciousness. Then he says that we should look at the images that we have built around ourselves. And he says they are like fences, they are fences of security. And he says that these images are of different nature. They are religious images, political images, they are personal images. And they express themselves in our lives as beliefs, as symbols, as ideas, ideologies. He wants us to look at the burden of these images on our thinking process. So these images, they are putting a lot of burden on the way we think and act in our daily life. And these images are dividing you from me. It is these images that divide one person from another. And this movement of consciousness, it shapes our entire life as individuals, and it shapes the social life also, the life of the society, politics, everything is shaped by the content of the consciousness that we as individuals have, as we as collective species or a race have. Now, he says then that we have to look at what is freedom, and again reiterates that it doesn't lie at the beginning, at the end of your journey. It lies at the very beginning, at the first step of your journey. So one has to begin with freedom. So I think that's one important thing, that can one start exploring the teachings or one's own life. That's what it implies. Not in order to get freedom from beliefs, conclusions, and so on, but end them at the very beginning. He also mentions here that freedom comes through observation, and that freedom is in the choiceless awareness of our daily existence and activity, which again comes back to exploration of our life and not the teachings. Because awareness cannot be cultivated by studying the teachings, by attending the dialogues. Perhaps he's saying that that awareness which you come upon when you see the danger of a life in which there is no awareness, that awareness is a byproduct of your perception of the danger of an inattentive life. When you see the danger of an inattentive life, then as a byproduct, awareness may come into being as a danger of a selective awareness. When you see the danger of selective awareness, then as a byproduct, one may become passively or choicelessly aware, not directly cultivate choiceless awareness, but it is like a byproduct. When you see the danger of not being choiceless, then you may come upon choicelessness. He says that the only way in which there is a possibility of a change in the mind is through observation of what is, feelings, thoughts, emotions, relationships as they are, nothing else. No technique in which as Mukeshji pointed out, even devotion is included. Any dualistic movement of the mind that creates a separation between the experiencer and what the experience is experiencing. It may include practice, it may include devotion, it may include search for truth, It may include anything that takes my attention away from what is actually happening at this very moment. Is it takes us away from observation of things as they are, yatha bhutam, as perhaps Buddha said. Things as they are is the isness of things. Then, in eventually, Krishnaji says that talks about negation. He says complete negation is actually the only positive things. Whatever one has created psychologically, a total negation, i- through only a total negation doesn't one come to the positive, and he ends the core of the teaching statement with the words. He says, then there is love, which is compassion and intelligence. So I think, in my opinion, at one level, understanding the teachings, living the teachings, to me it seems a very important statement. And in the light of this, say, set him once one has understood, throw him out of the window, forget Krishnaji, forget what he said. But what he says seems very profound. Now, in the light of this, am I examining my life on a daily basis? Am I examining my emotions, my relationships, what I'm doing at this moment? Am I doing it? Because we somehow believe that what Krishnaji said was, uh, perhaps he was pointing to a very profound, maybe something about existence that very few people have discovered, that he delved very deeply into human consciousness and expressed with tremendous clarity and insight what he observed. He was a very original person. We all believe that's why perhaps we are here.